The Odyssey is a film that has come with a lot of hype and a lot of baggage. And I have to say, after watching it, I was very surprised and not in the way that you might think. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are here to talk about The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's newest film, which is inspired by, based on the works of Homer, The Odyssey, which I guess spoilers in effect. It is a millennia's old text that even precedes it being written in terms of the story. But, if you haven't checked it out, we are going to be talking about it in this review. Just a heads up. And if you don't know this about me, I am a big lover of mythology. I have some of my books out here, the Odyssey, the Iliad, Greek myths. And this is a story that has a very special place in my heart because it is a part of that world. But I also feel like it's a story that has a ton of cultural significance. Let's talk about that. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. I want to know, what is your favorite myth? And it can be a classical myth, it can be a modern myth. Honestly, mythology is all around us if you just look around you. I guess for my first point, I want to talk about the sound and the music because that is a huge and important part of the film, and it is also an important part of the story. Originally, people do believe that stories like the Odyssey and the Iliad may have even been sung. They are poems that some say they are songs. And so I think it's really amazing that at the beginning, one of the things that we start off with is a song, the song of the Trojan War. And as we hear Demodocus banging down this staff to make a rhythm, played by Travis Scott, which is a casting that I thought was a crazy choice initially. Now, having seen the film, I can see the vision. That whole beginning of the film and the way the music is interwoven throughout it, the way that it feels like one long piece of music, or perhaps a sort of soundtrack or overture that has these little breaks within it, almost like breaks between the chapters that you would see in the book. I just feel like it's so expertly done. And the music is even beautifully married to moments in the story and dialogue, so that at times the dialogue feels rhythmic. It feels like it is a part of the poem. It feels like you are inside the poem or the song of the Odyssey. It's hard for me to explain, but watching this film is what it feels like to read the book, if that makes sense. I can't believe how beautifully Nolan captured that because I didn't think that that was possible. I mean, when I think about other films that have attempted to do such a thing, such as Troy, which is based on the Iliad, there are moments of that film that feel poetic, but I've never felt like I've been carried through a poem from beginning to end with a movie like I am with the Odyssey. It's truly amazing to me. There's a particular moment that I would like to highlight in the story that is literally a part of the music, and that is when Odysseus strings his bow at the end, when he's plucking, or I guess he's done stringing his bow and he plucks it. And that sound fits with the music at the time. And it also is a sound, that whole piece feels like it fits with an overture that we're seeing throughout the film that keeps coming back around. There's so much music in this actually that feels like it weaves into each other. Like there are elements of songs that feel like they fit into other parts, as though all of these moments and memories are echoing throughout Odysseus's journey as he's remembering, perhaps as he's recalling his story to Calypso. It's really, really well crafted. Like, wow. A big part of the reason why I enjoyed this film as well is because of the themes that Nolan chose to focus on, which exist in the Odyssey, but he's sort of taken and elevated certain themes and kind of made some adjustments so that those are the ones that he's really dialing in on. And the main one for me is the cost of war. I think that's a huge theme, and I think it is super relevant today in the time that we are living in, a time where we are so divided. We're also exploring how, in breaking sort of these laws of Zeus, in breaking these laws that we have just that are unspoken in our culture, to not hurt each other, to be kind, to care for one another and respect each other, we destroy things around us. So we're going into the cost of war and what it means to sort of fully be human, the goods and the bads. And I think that's extremely powerful and something that I love to explore in a safe place like a film. This is also why it's important that we have the right cast to carry us through this story, because we are dealing with some really big themes. We're dealing with a really big story. All of the characters here are named characters in the myths, and they're all, most of them, no, I would say all of them actually, are figures that are larger than life. And so when we have a cast that is this star studded, I think it is important because, like how all of these characters have a name, it is important for the cast members to have a name, to have that presence, to actually make sure that every character on screen is making an impact. While it may seem like some roles are significantly smaller than others, there is really no small parts in a film, and especially a film that is as epic as this one is. So I'm very glad that we had such an amazing cast to carry us through. Particularly, I was very surprised. I did not know that Elliot Page was in this. And if Elliot Page was in the trailer and I missed that, whoops, that's on me. But wow, a small role in terms of like on the page for sure, but such a significant role in terms of what this character represents, both for Odysseus, but also for the themes of this war that we're exploring and everything that it has cost the character, and that idea of when you are the person that's the smartest person in the room, how that as well can be a curse, how ignorance can be bliss, and knowing everything can just lead to only more pain, more suffering, and more loneliness in the world. And speaking of this amazing cast, I would like to take a moment to just acknowledge a few people specifically. I thought the whole cast was fantastic, though. So I just want to say to the whole cast, amazing job. However, my favorites in this film were definitely John Leguizamo. I love John Leguizamo and everything, so that's just kind of a. I'm definitely gonna love him in a movie, and this, no exception, he has yet to disappoint me in anything I've seen him in. Matt Damon, obviously as Odysseus, deserves his flowers. He did such a fantastic job, and there's so many sides to Odysseus that we see in this, and so much depth to this role, and I loved what he did with the character and the nuance. Oh my goodness, it was just so good. Also, Anne Hathaway in this, she was perfectly cast. I loved her in it, and I thought there was so much emotion and so many layers that we also got to examine with her character, Penelope. And Penelope, for me, is a very important character in Greek mythology. When it comes to the ladies of Greek mythology, she is one of my favorite characters. I think I love her because one of her greatest traits is her mind. She is a brilliant woman, and there is even a book that really gets into that based on the myths, but doing its own thing, and that is, of course, the Penelopiad. I don't know if Christopher Nolan read this book by Margaret Atwood, but I would not be surprised if he read this book by Margaret Atwood, because there are elements of it in the story. And I know that, of course, the Penelopiad is based on the story of Penelope and Odysseus. There is going to be some similar stuff, but it really goes deep into Penelope's version of the story, which we kind of explore in this movie quite a bit. I thought it was pretty cool. And when it comes to Penelope and Odysseus, something that I loved about this movie is that Nolan chose to paint it really as a love story. It really is about Odysseus coming to terms with his part in the war and taking some responsibility and deciding to face himself, to accept himself, the good and the bad. But it's also about this romance between Penelope and Odysseus. And while during the time that this story would have been set in, there probably weren't a lot of marriages that were based on love, in mythology, there is a lot of romance and there is a lot of love. And what I love about these two characters together is they're both oftentimes the smartest person in the room. And that's why they work so well as a couple. And that's something that they captured perfectly in the film. And this is a very beautiful film from beginning to end, whether we're dealing with horrific elements or whether we are actually looking at a hopeful moment, a possible future that could have existed that didn't, or even the beauty in the world despite the chaos that we are being plunged into. It is visually stunning. So, audibly, it checked the box for me. Visually, it checked the box for me. Emotionally, it checked the box for me. A big part of the emotion that I loved in this was some of the female rage that we explore. And a little surprised by that because we are dealing with a story where women tend to have more of a reduced role. In mythology, there are characters that just kind of get tossed aside a little bit. You know, everyone's just everybody's wife or everybody's mother for the most part. But I felt that Nolan really did quite a bit with these female characters. There was a lot of power behind them, there was a lot of rage at the world. And considering the time period that we're in, although, you know, there are a lot of rights and freedoms that women have, it is a scary time. And I think there is still a lot to be angry at. There's a lot to be afraid of. And so seeing that reflected in characters like Cersei and Penelope, and even to a lesser extent Helen, that was really powerful and really magical for me. I'm thinking that Christopher Nolan maybe watches my videos because I think I brought up in my Oppenheimer review that my one thing that I would love to see more of in Nolan's film is sort of the power of the feminine, you know, something that was more female driven. Because while he does have a lot of female characters in his stories, a lot of the times they really are defined by the men that they are connected to in some way. And even though in this story, these women are still connected to men, it is obviously still a male dominated story and it is a classical story. And that makes sense to me that these women are still in that place. Something that I thought he did really well was he brought out the parts of these characters that I think are kind of in between the lines that exist, but they exist in what's not being said almost. But he said the things that we don't get to hear. And I really enjoyed that. So, Christopher Nolan, if you watch my videos, I guess, thank you for making this movie for me and for taking my note. Maybe? Also, I would like to offer you another challenge for your next film. Maybe perhaps we could have some scenes with women talking to one another without any sort of male connection. I think that would be kind of cool. Or, you know what? Even better, what about for the next movie, Chris, if I can call you that? We could have a female lead, fully a female lead. I would love that. And while I'm sure there would be tons of people lining up for that role, if you ever need someone that's a new face, I am happy to oblige. You feel free to call my agent. I might be busy on the set of AMC's Queen of the Damned as Jessie or Maharet or Macaire. That might be possible. So we'll have to figure out the scheduling potentially when you want to film this story. But I'm down if you're down to have me. I'd be happy to do a screen test for you to see if you like what I do. For me, I have a very personal connection to mythology and history, and I'm a big believer of the importance of history in culture. It's very important because a lot of the times the way that we learn is through historical mistakes that we have made. And so when we forget about what has happened, when we forget about wars that we fought in and the horrors of the world, and we forget about all of the good as well that we've done, it really leaves us lost. And it leaves us susceptible to repeating the same mistakes again. And just like how Odysseus acknowledges at the end of the story about how he wanted his story to be in a song because he wants to make sure that people hear these warning calls and that it is passed down. And he knows that even then the story will fade over time and it will get lost and people will forget, and they will forget about these things and they will make the same mistakes again. That is why it is so important to make sure your story can survive throughout the ages. That is why these hero stories are so important in our history and why we return to them time and time again. There is so much here to learn. And looking back on classical literature, which reflects the history of the time period it was written in, or whether we're looking back at actual history, which is even acknowledged in this film. And I thought they did a good job acknowledging historical elements that we now know to be truth, or we believe to be truth, at least pretty close to the story. I thought that was really cool. I mean, at one point, we have the acknowledgement of the Hellespont, which is the trading route that was beside Troy. And that is historically why people believe the Trojan War actually happened, because there are signs that it happened, but we don't really know why. And the story of the Odyssey and the Iliad are kind of these fantastical tales for people to tell, to entertain each other, to also kind of give some meaning to the terrible times they would have found themselves in after the end of the Bronze Age, in one of the many historical dark ages that we've lived through and that we've survived through. The reality is that the Hellespont is believed to be the real reason that that war happened. It wasn't Helen, it wasn't one woman, That's crazy. And even when we talk about Helen, they want to acknowledge sort of these different ideas of what happened with Helen. Was Helen taken by Paris? Did she leave of her own accord? But if you leave of your own accord, you can't even do that as a woman, in this time historically that it's set in. So of course, it always becomes the idea that she was taken because that is reflective of the time and that is still reflective of some people's mindsets today. So it's still relevant. Man, I just think the story has so many layers, whether we're talking about the mythology or whether talking about, how our own time period that we're in now is informing the retelling of it. I just think it's so powerful. And of course, it's a story that takes some creative liberties when it comes to the Odyssey, as you can read it right now as it is written, you know, because there are some things that we just kind of cut. There are some characters that are not in this. So it's not completely a one for one. But for the most part, I feel like it beautifully captured the spirit of the poem and actually hit all of the major beats. And the only things that are changed, I feel, are changed to serve what the story is here to explore thematically. So it all makes sense to me, the changes that they made. And I honestly have no problems with them. And I know that historical accuracy is still something that can be important. And this is a fictional tale, but it is set in a certain period. However, I do think it is important to remember that with the Odyssey, when we talk about historical accuracy, it kind of doesn't exist in the way you think it would. And that is because when the Odyssey was originally created, it would have been as a piece that was spoken or was sung by an orator. Homer, perhaps. But Homer historically is also believed to potentially be many people. It could have been a collective of people. Homer could have been the name that we give to the person that tells those stories. Kind of like how people believe today that William Shakespeare may have been a collective of people. That's a theory that people have historically. So, first of all, when we got the story, it would have been way down the line from when it was initially set that we'd be talking about it. So already there's probably going to be historical inconsistencies, and it's also a fictional tale, so there's no history in that. And then the other thing you have to consider with the Odyssey is that then even later down the line it was finally written down. At that point, how much had it changed and evolved? We don't know because we weren't there when it was originally spoken to us. And then from that point on, when it's finally written down, it's translated and it's translated and it's translated and it's translated. So there's so many different versions of the Odyssey that exist today because different translators have different interpretations of the text and what it means. And people's perspectives affects those translations that we read as well. There was a recent translation that I believe came out of the Iliad that I think is by Emily Wilson. And one of the things that she talks about is how she did her best to adapt the text one for one because she felt that it was important to try to maintain the text as accurately as you can. There are so many other translators that have come in that have paraphrased things or really recontextualized or interpreted whole parts of these stories. So, when we talk about historical accuracy, it's just important to remember that there is no real original version of this story that we have. And it's always being adapted for the time that it's being told in. And that is the magic of hero stories. And that is why they resound throughout the ages, because they grow and evolve as we grow and evolve, and they reflect our own world back at us, and they allow us to see ourselves in them. There is so much magic when it comes to the hero's tale, which is what I think the spirit of this movie really captures. It has a beautiful narrative that is woven perfectly. The pacing of it was excellent. It is a long film, but it does not feel long. You get lost in it as Odysseus gets lost on his journey home. You're right there with him. It really sucks you in. And that was something that I absolutely adored about it. And I cannot wait to watch it again. I mean, I know proximity bias is a thing, but for me, this movie truly is an epic for the ages. It may even be my favorite Nolan film moving forward, which is crazy because my favorite movie of all time is a Nolan film, and that is Memento. Yeah, I need to watch this a few more times. Ask me in 5 months and see, but this might be my new favorite. So those are my thoughts on it. Do I think you should see it in the theaters? Yes. If you can, see it in 70 millimeter. That's how I saw it in IMAX, and I would highly recommend that. I paid for my ticket willfully, happily, gleefully. In fact, I booked it a little late. So because of that, I had to be in the second row. And by a little late, I mean they were selling these tickets like last year. And I thought no one's going to buy movie tickets a year in advance. Y'all really did that, didn't you? Y'all really did that. So I was sitting in the second row, which means that the end of the film, a lot of the fighting was. It was a little hard for me to get the full scope of everything that was happening because I was so up close. So I definitely want to see it again. I definitely would see it in IMAX and 70 millimeter again. The colors are absolutely stunning. The lighting, so much real flame, so much real flame. I think all the flames in this were real, and we used them as lighting. Whoa. Definitely go check it out. And let me know your thoughts when you do watch this movie. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you just like, it was good, it was fine, it was great? Where are you at with it? And also let me know, what are your thoughts on mythology? Are you a big lover of mythology or heroes' tales? Are you also a myth and history nerd? Let's talk about it down in the comments. I want to hear from you because I love talking about these things. And I'm honestly nervous. My last Nolan review did not do great. And so I hope this does well because I would love to talk more about mythology, including, I have to say, after watching this movie, I think we need to talk about Rome sooner, guys. I know I have a lot of things I want to talk about right now, but Rome. And yes, I know this is season 2. I have a lot of DVDs and I didn't want to grab my season 1 DVD because it's like further deep in the entertainment unit. That's all I have for this one. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my review. Please hype it, like it, comment. I would love that. I'd love to talk to you. And until next time, friends, as always, stay nerdy. Bye. And if you love when I talk about film, I love to talk about film. So please consider clicking this next.